Last time I talked about the recession and the government money printing that's hurtling along, and it's getting worse. Recently, we found out that in the last 2 weeks of March, the Spanish, French, and Italian economies shrunk by about a third. Those figures were massaged to make it look as though that was only 5% over 3 months. No, wrong answer. That was 1/3 over 2 weeks, and it's probably going to get worse. Spain has at least been honest about it and gone cap in hand to the ECB asking for a bailout, which they'll probably get, though not as much as they want, because Germany fears Spanish debts taking down European banks. And all that governments are going to be able to do is to keep printing and spending money, because in the hopes that they'll be able to tide over the economies until those economies recover of their own accord, which is pretty unlikely. What the governments fear, the one thing they need to do is to prop up the value of the loans which banks have made to zombie businesses, to bankrupt businesses, which those businesses can't repay. And the only way, what the governments fear is that those loans go down in value and all those banks go broke, and then government falls over. So governments are going to keep printing money and spending it and handing it over to banks. That's going to be their main aim. If this keeps going, as it looks like it's going to, then we're going to see deflation in the short and medium term. House prices, share prices, bond prices, pension payouts are going to go down, and governments will have to keep printing into that to try and keep the economy going, printing and spending. And if they keep doing that, at some stage a switch will come, things will flip, where people in general, as a group, suddenly say to themselves, I don't trust this confetti money that's getting printed and spent out. I don't value it. I don't trust the authorities, the government, the central banks that are printing up all this money. I'm not going to save it anymore. I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to spend it. And then you will see inflation. You will see savings collapse overnight. You will see governments falling over, and you will see society becoming ungovernable. In those circumstances, governments then can't pay welfare. What you will then see in response to that is likely to be riots, which in turn damage the authority of governments further, which in turn further decreases the ability of governments to gather taxes, which decreases the ability of government to pay out welfare, which leads to further riots, and so on, in a downward spiral. Now, if that happens, you are going to see society becoming ungovernable. In those circumstances, the forces of order retreat to the hub, Parliament, Whitehall, local services and installations. You'll find that 122,000 coppers across the UK don't go very far. You won't be able to get a policeman if your house gets burgled. As a result, burglars will graduate up to becoming home invaders. Large parts of London will probably become gangland turf. People won't stop their cars at traffic lights because they fear the carjackers. Policemen will find that they can make more money if they join in the rackets themselves. Welfare, housing, local services will probably break down, become patchy at best, and the most vulnerable will be left to fend for themselves, left to their own devices. Now, in such desperate and lawless circumstances, where the state has failed and the state can no longer force law, force order upon people, people will seek to satisfy their fundamental human need for law, for order. People will seek to satisfy that by grouping together amongst themselves. And in doing so, in satisfying that fundamental human need, people will only feel confident doing that with people they trust, people whose behavior they can predict, people who think like them, people who act like them, people who they know will think and behave like them, people whose behavior they can read. And that means grouping together with their own kind, immediate friends and family, neighbours, strangers who they know think and act like them. That means that society will fall out along ethnic lines. This happened during the 2011 riots, where within 3 days Muslim men were patrolling Muslim areas, Sikh men were guarding Sikh shops, white British people were patrolling white British areas, and that will happen again. the likelihood is that the reason that happens is because people need to feel safe and secure providing that need, trusting other people to provide that, to meet that need, and only trusting people who look, think and act like them in order to do so. What you will then see is many immigrant areas becoming, in effect, independent areas declaring UDI, particularly Islamic areas, declaring UDI, declaring the supremacy of their own forms of law. We will probably see large areas of London, Birmingham, Bradford, Manchester, Sheffield, Kirklees, Leicester, these areas becoming self-declared Sharia zones, effectively being foreign territory, foreign countries, rejecting English law, imposing their own law, probably quite a severe form of their own law, in order to keep different nationalities within their areas together, and maybe even having their own forms of border control within our land. Now, that is the point at which we need to keep our heads. That is the point at which we risk losing our heads, because that is the point at which we will feel that we have lost forever. But that will in fact be the point at which self-control and control of the situation is most necessary. And that will in fact be the point at which we will have won. That will be the turning point. And I want to describe how in the next video.